All right, Bulls and Bears, you're watching Bull Boom Bear Bust. We have a lot of economic recent developments to get caught up on. The trade war, the de-escalation of the tariffs, the cost of living, what the Fed just came out and said as far as what they see happening here, and it should be a warning to all people if the Fed's actually saying this. So we're going to get into that and more. Let's go ahead and get started right here. And we're looking at a 5-day chart here. This is the Dow Jones. Skyrocketed today, over 1,000 points actually, over 1,400 gain in the Dow Jones. That represents about a 3.4% increase. Let's jump over to a 5-day chart. S&P 500, similar situation, up 4.25% on the S&P 500. Other indices were similar in the increase. And what do we say right here on this channel? We said that if a trade deal was ever reached, and this is not 100% sealed, this is just a 90-day pause in the high tariffs. The tariffs are still in place. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes. So this is not even technically a trade deal, and we've already seen a big surge in the stock market. Now, when we go out to a 1-year chart, still looking at the S&P 500, where we've made a pretty big recovery, right? From that big drop that I said here, I'm buying the dip, and I bought the dip, and we're doing really well because we knew this was going to happen, right? We've said here many times that this administration, it's red light, green light, it's on again, off again. What happens one day could be completely reversed a week or two later, and that's what we're seeing. But the tariffs haven't been completely reversed. In fact, what we did is we lowered the tariffs for 90 days, and they're calling this a temporary truce. They're calling this just a way to kind of hold things off because things were falling apart very rapidly. Even though the stock market was recovering, there was a lot of fear and panic out there amongst consumers of higher prices. We even saw a big surge in companies ordering goods before the tariffs, kind of front running the tariffs and loading up on goods and supplies to try to offset some of these prices that they were expecting to increase. So we'll see how that plays out. But here's what's happening right now here's what we know now. Here's the numbers. The tariff that the U.S. was going to place on China that were going to be 145%, that were for a short while, have now been slashed from 145% down to 30% during this 90-day pause. I've got some notes over here. Also, China's tariffs on the U.S., they agreed to slash those from 125% down to 10%. And we are much more reliant on China than they are on us. So it's interesting that the tariffs they have on us are actually lower, right? But it affects China as well. We saw some reports that there were major job losses over there, people just not getting paid without even giving notice. They were not given notice that they weren't going to get paid, and they ended up striking, and we saw people protesting. We played a couple of the clips here in this channel. So it did cause a lot of problems on both sides, right? So it is better to have some sort of deal and negotiate something that works out best for both countries. But then you have to go back to what we were told out of this administration. We were told that the higher tariffs are going to cause manufacturers to bring jobs back to the U.S., and we knew that that was a bunch of BS. We knew that that wasn't going to happen. All right, and we said right here, just look at it from a common sense perspective. If higher tariffs are going to cause jobs to come back to the U.S., why not just leave the higher tariffs on there, right? So the fact that they're lowering these tariffs lets you know that the previous reason that they were told is a bunch of nonsense, right? But it is good. I mean, to put the positive perspective on this, it is good. Triple-digit tariffs would have effectively stopped trade between the two countries ultimately, eventually. Didn't happen all at once, right? But things were definitely headed in that direction if something wouldn't have changed, right? So we kind of figured that things would change, and here we are with this 90-day pause, or the more proper term would be 90-day reduction of the tariffs on both sides. Now, how did we know this was likely to happen? Well, we saw it previously on automobile tariffs, right? First they were set high, then they had a retreat, they were lowered. So anything can change, folks, from day to day. So for the people that say that we talk about the same thing here in this channel every report, it's not true. Every report is new, updated information, so please make sure you're tuned in to stay updated on all this, folks. But when it's all said and done, it looks to be that there's at least going to be a 10% tariff remaining across the board, minimum, on all countries. I can't see any country not having tariffs levied against them, especially considering we're the number one, and number one not in a good way, but we're the number one consumer nation. In other words, Americans spend the most money, and a lot of it's just borrowed money. But we're still the largest economy in the world when it comes to spending, and that's mainly because we have the reserve currency and the ability to just loan out limitless amounts of money to people. And the U.S. is not just the world's largest economy by a little; it's actually a lot. Actually, the second one is China, coming in at 19 trillion GDP. We're up over 30 trillion GDP. And that's pretty interesting when you think about it, because China, population-wise, is over four times the size of the U.S. I believe it's somewhere around there. But even with four times the number of people, they still do not equal the amount of economic activity of the U.S. Again, why? Because we have the world reserve currency, and therefore we have the power to be able to do this, right? People in the United States that don't work actually live better than people in other countries that work sometimes 12, 16 hours a day, sadly. Or you could say that's good, because if you're American, you want there to be a good quality of life. In other words, having the U.S., having the world reserve currency in the U.S. is a thing that allows us to have a better standard of living. I mean, bottom line. I mean, when you can borrow money to the grave, then you're going to live a very good life. Even though most people are living in debt, still the quality of life is very good. People driving new cars, most people with the roof over their head. That number's homeless. The number of homeless is rising, but overall, we still have a better standard of living than most other countries. And the world reserve currency, right? It's not a coincidence, folks. And we're going to talk about what the Fed person came out and said here recently. It's sounding pretty dire. I don't know if I believe what she said, but we'll talk about what she said. But first, we have some signs that prices are coming down with something pretty significant to people, and that's the cost of rents. Rents are coming down, and that's going to be an area where we're seeing prices continue to soften, especially with what's happening to the population right now. A lot of people leaving the country, stuff like that. So rents will continue to soften if that continues, unless we see some other programs implemented that push prices back up, like eviction moratoriums or something like that. So let's talk about rents real quick. Then we'll get into what the Fed chairman person said and other news today I wanted to get into. Here we go. Out of Redfin, rents actually fell 1% year over year. Not a huge drop, not much of a noticeable savings unless you're in Austin, Texas, and some other cities. But it's the biggest drop in 14 months. So prices are down 1%. That's part of the story. But the bigger story is the drops are getting larger. It's the largest drop in 14 months. So 1% today could be 2% in 6 months, could be 10% in 12 months, as we're seeing an acceleration of the price drops, right? Prices are dropping, yes, but they're dropping bigger every time we take a look at them, right? So hopefully this will evolve into something that's going to make life a little bit easier for us working folks here, right? I think we can all agree that whether you're renting, whether you own, that lower prices are better. And then when prices are lower, it makes everything else better too, because think about it. When rents are lower, then more people are going to opt to not buy a house. And that takes some pressure off of home prices, because the less people are bidding on homes, prices come down, sellers have to lower their prices, right? Of course, if you're selling your home, none of this is good news for you, because you want to get a higher price. But as far as just the cost of living coming down, I think most people can agree that a lower cost of living is better than a higher cost of living. All right, but Redfin is reporting that the median asking rent was down $80 from the record high. Not huge, but $80 a month could help some people buy a few meals, buy some groceries. Was down to $1,625. That's now the median asking rent. And also we're seeing elevated apartment supply and more vacancies helping pushing rents lower. Asking rents fell the fastest in Austin, Texas, where they're down 10% year over year. So could we see a 10% drop nationwide ultimately as all of this plays out? All right, now let's get into what the Federal Reserve person said. This is a prediction. Prices will soon soar and spending will fall in the U.S. The Federal Reserve Board member tells an audience over in Ireland. This was Adriana Kugler. And what did she say? I'll give you an exact quote. Quote, although higher tariffs on U.S. imported goods may affect our macroeconomy through many channels, I think they will primarily act as a negative supply shock, raising prices and decreasing economic activity, unquote. She said that in Dublin today, actually on Monday. And this was even after the news had come out, because the news had come out earlier in the day of the lowering or the 90-day reduction of these tariffs against China. She said that even though she knew these were coming down. So is she correct? Are we still going to see major shocks throughout the economy, and people are still going to pay much higher prices, is what she's basically saying. The move to drop American tariffs on Chinese goods and the retaliatory tariffs from China ultimately will help, but it's not going to give us the easy life that a lot of people had wanted. That's what she's basically saying. That prices are still going to go up drastically and it's going to cause major job losses. We'll have to see how it plays out. Is she correct? Is she not correct? Maybe you can let me know down in the comments. I think she's partially correct. I think prices are going to go up still. Overall, I don't think we're going to see a drop in the cost of living without some black swan situation that comes in and disrupts the overall financial system. Without that, I think prices are still going to go up. I could be wrong. We'll have to see how it plays out, folks. The Guardian put this out. Americans are putting life on hold amid economic anxiety, according to a poll. Well, I say this is not true because the freeway is still full of cars, the shopping mall is full of people, baseball games still full of people. Nobody's putting life on hold. So what are they talking about? This poll here, Americans are reconsidering major life events, including marriage, having children, and buying a home. Okay, so that's what they're talking about. That is true. Home sales, 40-year low, birth rate dropping. People are afraid to start families. But they're spending their money on other things. So more single people, more people not having to pay for the cost of having a family are doing other stuff. Going to baseball games, entertainment, sporting events, concerts, shopping, buying things, right? So, but what they're saying is people are putting certain things on hold. 6 in 10 Americans said the economy has affected at least one of their major life goals, according to this poll. And this is because of lack of affordability and anxiety of future price increases and higher cost of living down the road. But here's where it gets really crazy. The current administration is out there saying they want to encourage Americans to have more babies. And they're floating out and they're talking about a $5,000 baby bonus for new mothers. So that's going to be very interesting, right? We're seeing a lot of things promised and a lot of ideas floated out there. But so far, nothing that's really going to make any major structural change, right? Having more babies is not going to bring down the cost of living, which that's what a lot of people want. They want the cost of living to come down. In fact, having less babies would actually be more deflationary because you're going to have less people in the economy spending money. But we've seen other countries put in controls on their population and even the ability to have like a certain number of kids. We've seen that in some countries, and that didn't make my life much easier in those countries either. So to me, it looks like a big mess. But they do give us a chart here out of this report. The major life decisions that have been affected by this. Buying a house is the biggest one. 75% of people said that. Moving to a higher cost of living area, 70%. So some people wanted to move to a more desirable area, but the cost was too much, so they put that off. Making a large purchase, upgrading your living situation, having a child, switching jobs, doing an education program. Also, people putting off college or trade schools because of the high cost, and getting married, right? So those are the big ones. Moving on here, folks, something that affects probably 99% of the people here, unless you don't drive or live in like a larger city where you can take the bus, you can take the subway, etc. Gas stations, more and more of them are charging people for using a credit card because the credit card companies are getting a percentage off of each transaction when a card is swiped. So gas stations are now, and not just gas stations, but more often now they're charging people $1 a gallon though, so not just per swipe, per gallon. I can make it any number I want, is what the gas station attendant said. And are charging customers $1 more per gallon for using credit cards. That's crazy. Credit cards have been a popular, convenient way for most things, yada, yada, yada. Gas stations are taking advantage. In most states, it's legal for businesses to impose a surcharge on customers who are paying by credit card. One of those states is Florida. And the only requirement is businesses must inform the customer of the surcharge ahead of time. However, some Florida gas stations are testing that concept to an unfair limit. They told this entity a fleet of 12 trucks and fueling them all costs his business about $3,000 per month. He went to fill up one of his trucks and noticed something that shocked him at the pump. I noticed a little box at the bottom, and it didn't match the price that was on the street. A small sign on the pump showed those paying with the credit card would pay $1 more per gallon. That's crazy. So there you go. So because of the fees that credit cards are charging, these companies are charging at least $1 to make up the transaction fee. Sometimes it's more. But now they're taking advantage of it, and what we see, this greedflation, causing greedflation. And since there's no law, no limit, they're just going to add on as much as they want. Now, some people would say, well, that's the free market. If someone doesn't like the price, they can go to the next gas station down the street or maybe across the street. Other people say, no, this should be illegal. They should not allow this. And I could see both sides of the argument, but what happens when this gas station does it, so customers go across the street to the other gas station because they don't have to pay the fee, then that gas station decides to do it. Then all of a sudden, all the gas stations are doing it. And now instead of $1 a gallon, it's $2 a gallon. It's $3 a gallon. See where this goes, folks? So does there have to be laws put on this stuff, or will the free economy take care of it? In other words, less laws is going to make everything fair and even, right? A free market. We haven't had a free market here in the United States for decades, by the way. Couple other things here, folks. Walmart. Walmart is stepping their game up. It looks like they're trying to look more like Target. They're opening up the next generation supercenter as part of a broad growth strategy. Does Walmart really need to grow more? Does Walmart really need to grow more? They're already the nation's largest retailer, but here's what they're doing. Let me bring up this article here. This is out of Walmart.com, actually. These are what's considered a new supercenter, modernization, and to strengthen local economies. This is what they're doing. We've got mannequins in there. Wow, mannequins at Walmart. There's a new concept. A sign that says fresh. Okay. Very interesting. A little area for baby tech. Personal care, of course, doesn't really look that much different. They're doing some other things, though. They're trying to be more like Costco. What else are they doing? Some of them include now a full-service gas station with pumps, so kind of like Costco. Of course, pharmacy now. Not all locations have pharmacy, but more of them will now with these centers. A refreshed vision center for glasses. Elevated apartments in fashion, baby, home, and pets. Regional and popular favorites such as Hispanic bakery section, fresh tortilla maker, sushi station, and Dunkin'. So there we go. Walmart's stepping their game up as if they weren't already the most dominant retail chain in America. And folks, let's wrap it up with this. Some jobs are coming back to the U.S. I shouldn't say coming back to the U.S. Some jobs are being created in the U.S., but not in a way that you would tie to any sort of progress, right? McDonald's announces plans to hire 375,000 workers with the current administration's labor secretary, and this is going to be nationwide. Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer was present at the announcement as the fast food chain cozies up to the administration. McDonald's is one of the country's largest private employers. McDonald's announced plans to hire up to 375,000 workers this summer at a news conference. So there you go, folks. More people work at McDonald's. McDonald's donated $1 million to this administration's inauguration. And so is that what's going to be the bragging point of the economy, is more jobs at McDonald's, right? I thought we were going to be eliminating fast food jobs with the automated menus and the robot flippers, flipping the burgers and all that stuff. But this is apparently going to be a big push, and that way they can say, look at all the jobs we created, right? Even though it's a fast food job, right? It doesn't pay the most. The latest hiring push comes as McDonald's opens more U.S. restaurants. The company is aiming to add 900 new domestic locations by 2027. So there you go, folks. Trade war, tariffs up, tariffs down, stock market blasting off, more McDonald's jobs. Is that good news? What do you think about the other news today with the gas stations charging the extra fee? Should it be eliminated? Should it be not allowed? Or is it the free market? A customer can go to a place that's cheaper. And what do you think about the Federal Reserve woman out there saying that prices are going to go up and jobs are going to be lost still because of the tariffs? Let me know what you think about this down in comments. What do you think about the dropping this now down to 30% for the tariffs on China? And where does this end, right? Is it going to be going back up if they don't come to a final agreement after the 90 days and disaster is going to strike again here, or the fears of a disaster striking? Let me know what you think down in the comments, everybody. As always, keep stacking. Talk to you very soon. Bye for now. Peace.